During the next few sessions, we're going to talk about managing Unix file systems. But before we do that, we need to cover a little bit about how Unix file systems actually work. Now, you've probably worked with Windows drives and have Windows drive letters, partitions, and so forth, directories. And Unix is very similar in that it divides things up too. It divides up entire disks. Now, you also may be familiar with the way Linux does drives and partitions and extended partitions. But Unix, particularly BSD, does it a little bit differently. It's the same concept, just the names might be a little bit different. A Unix file system, such as the BSD file system that we're using, uses the notation of drives, which are the physical hard drives. And within those drives you have 4 slices. Now these slices, if you were talking in terms of Linux, are also called partitions. So slices and partitions are the same thing. You have the drive and it's divided up into 4 partitions or 4 slices. Now it's further divided down in Linux into extended partitions. So in Linux a drive would be a drive, partition, and then within that partition extended partitions. Well, within BSD, as I said, the terminology is a little bit different. You have drives, slices, and within those slices you have partitions. So the terminology can be a little bit confusing depending upon whether you're talking about Linux partitions or Unix BSD partitions. They mean 2 different things. Now, the slice and partition info is viewed and configured through several utilities and files, and some of the ones we'll talk about as we go through this part of the course includes the mount command, sysinstall, fdisk. We'll also take a look at the etc fstab file, the BSD label command, several different utilities out there that enable you to manage and maintain the Unix file systems that you'll be working with in BSD Unix or in other forms of Unix also, such as Linux. Now here we have a small diagram, and this diagram is from the FreeBSD documentation on the BSD site. I want to give credit where credit's due here. And you can see that this disk is divided up into several slices. And the first slice in Linux, we have AD0, which is an ATA drive, an IDE drive, is called AD0. And the first slice is S1, for slice 1. And you can see this slice is dedicated to DOS or Windows. It could be a FAT partition or an NTFS partition slice in this case. Then we have another slice or partition, and it's in this. The partition is in the second slice called AD0S2, and within AD0S2 you have several partitions. Remember, it can get confusing depending upon whether we're talking about Linux or BSD, and right now we're talking BSD. So, first slice is AD0S1, that's the DOS or Windows, and then the second slice, AD0S2, is divided into several partitions, A, B, E, and F. And you have them mounted as /, which is root, swap, var, and USR. How things are called in BSD Unix is a little bit different. As you know, most device files are off the /dev directory. And we have the device file itself, AD0S1A, is mounted on /, which is root. Now, if you look at the different devices that can be mounted in the screenshot, we have AD0, which we know is the drive, slice 1, and then we have the B partition on slice 1. Right now, that's the swap partition. The other one we have is AD0S1A. That's the drive 0, slice 1, partition A, and that's mounted on root, or just /. And that uses the UFS file system, as opposed to ext2 or ext3 or RISE or so forth. BSD Unix uses UFS by default. The next one we'll see in this entry is ACD0. That's the CD-ROM device, and that is mounted under /CD-ROM. Now that we've talked about partitions and slices and disks, let's go a little bit farther. Let's actually look at the file system. Now, the file system can be mounted all under one partition or under one slice, or it can be mounted separately. But basically the structure of the file system, it looks the way it looks on the screen. Now, this is a generic file system. This is not necessarily BSD or Linux, because they can vary between, say, Solaris, IRX, BSD, Linux, and so forth. So this is just a notational kind of file system here. You see that we have the root, and everything goes under root. You have /temp, /usr/var/etc/mnt, and there are many other ones as well, depending upon what distribution of Linux or version of BSD or Solaris you have. And under those you have various subdirectories like local bin under user, log under var, and so forth. For example, if we have slash, which is root, and then etc under that, /etc, and then the SSH directory under that, we notate that as /etc/SSH. That's our absolute path. And if we do a directory here, and we'll look in the screenshot here, we look in the root directory, we do an ls on that, and we see that all the different directories under there, like /mount, /media, /var, /usr, we see those under the slash, under the root directory. And then if we change directories to /etc, we can also look in there and we'll see SSH. So we can change directory to SSH, and you can see how it's notated down there, /etc/SSH. So you've got how it looks on the screen and how it looks logically, the diagram before this. So navigating around through the file system is not that difficult. And this was just an introduction to the file system itself. We're also going to cover creating file systems and managing file systems as we go through the next few sessions. So you'll help to understand a little bit better how file systems work.